Well, hello there, everyone. Here to show you right here is like the smart button discovered taught us color activity, talking about if it's telephones and along with TVs, and basically that the whole part about this activity right here is that talking about is like a type of button, and knowing about like that we probably knowing about like the type of button that more likely that we can push, and that type of the type of button that more likely that we can push, and more likely though that like if we push the button just because that we see it and just knowing about what does that button do or anything like that, but knowing about that the type of button that more likely that it pushes is that if it what you call is like to where allow it to where that it would allow somebody to make a phone call, or if it's to maybe to enter something in. I'm like if you're doing something, say push a between talk and program, etc., etc. If it's making a phone call or changing a channel, something like that. But the whole part about this activity kind of brings back a lot of stories from whenever I was young. That talking about it's like that. Whenever from whenever it was the first start of a job, that knowing about, I'm like that using telephones, and for the most time that we may think that especially I think that whenever we start out with zero, like that we may have started out with zero at one time, to where if we don't have a smartphone or a tablet, and then all of a sudden we you wind up receiving something like that, we wind up buying something like that for a pretty good price, for a pretty good sale, etc., etc. And all of a sudden it's like that trying to learn how to work it, and then all of a sudden that and then you wind up getting another one, and you may find another one about similar that's on sale, and it may be that you may that this other one may have been included in this certain package. And basically talking about right here, as I'll go ahead and use right here, it's like a television set as an example, that if we start out with buying a television set, let's just say if we spend about maybe $200 or $300 on a television set, and then for maybe a 19-inch or something like that, and then it may be that for around maybe the holidays, if we see like if we're given or like if it's like what you call maybe prize, whichever, and then knowing about if we receive about maybe 3 other TVs, and then the next thing you know it, Warner about, I'm like with all these TVs right here. No, by the time you go to the setup options and then the connection, connector jacks and stuff like that, just to get if it's satellite or if it's any type of internet TV or anything like that going on there, and it's like that that one TV that only receives about maybe 2 channels. I'm like you have one TV that could be hooked up in the basement, maybe in the office, maybe in the bedroom, maybe in the family room, something like that. You have one TV that maybe only gets about maybe 10 channels, and the one maybe down in the basement that gets about usually they say that usually the TV down in the basement that really that may not get a real good reception, and let's just say that it only picks up about 3 channels. 3 channels. Say it all depends on I guess the antenna quality, and then maybe the one in the bedroom and the family room that gets 25 channels. And at the time, like wondering that how come that with these different TVs here, and knowing that you had these tech issues, as knowing about that with the smart button discover, knowing about, I'm like that new ways, of course, how to discover for new technology. But on the other hand, I could probably say that that's like about if you have a number of TVs, and more likely that you have one to where that only picks up 10 channels, the other one picks up 25, and the other one only picks up 3. One of them that don't deliver a real clear picture, good sound. The other one delivers real fantastic good sound and picture, and the other one that fades out at times, etc., etc. I'm like either way, that knowing about, I'm like that you. If we were to be going out and buying that a television set after a television set, maybe within about 2 or 3 years, and thinking about how many television sets you think you'll be able to collect, and knowing about if you want to have get TV programming programmed onto TV, etc., etc. But you have right here is basically talk about, say, besides if it's watches, if it's smartphones or tablets or television sets, but you have right here is like a cell phone. And I wouldn't use this, by the way, as an example right here. If I remember that whenever I was saving up my money one year, that I can remember that you're looking in the looking online, and a few of them I guess was for online shopping, and I remember seeing a couple times, I think from some cell phone companies, that they even had to where that you would even buy a phone card a lot of times. Buy a phone card if you want to put more minutes. Anybody who was under the age of 18 would more likely have to buy one. So prepaid minute plans it is, but nowadays that they have it to where, like say with Magic Jack, or if it's Skype or anything like that, but you have right here is example right here of a phone, and I'll go ahead and write in here. I'm like, yeah, you have right here, for one, usually if you dial one, usually that they get you to, like say maybe advanced settings or anything like that, and then 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And then I was like, with 0, and then you have right here, it's like say the star key, I had about right here, along say with the pound. And for the most part, that see here, this right here, actually this the speaker would be at about right here. I'll go ahead and draw right here 0. I guess usually that like 0 would lead you to say the number for the operator, but like for most time with most phones that they usually say that I'm like, yeah, that usually that with most phones back in the old days, I'm like, back in the old days, that I'm like, yeah, that phones kind of like this, maybe other than the touch screens, that this I guess will be kind of an example. Maybe the old model phones from back nearly 13 years ago. I remember I had those, and I remember nowadays that a lot of people have that the chocolate phone or the smartphones and the touch phones, iPhone 5s, but it had it to where that you would have had to dial a certain number on the keypad just to find out how many minutes that you have remaining on the phone, etc., etc. But on the other hand, too, to knowing about if we were to have these different numbers right here, and what to say with the number right here is that knowing about that that you have right here with these numbers, and then if there was let's take a certain number though, and like you dial a number to reach, it's like for like usually the area code. Usually that the area codes would be at about right here, like for 000, like for like area code and dash, and then of course the number right here. But I'm like, yeah, that if we were to be calling in a number, and the way I think about with most of the phones I have around here, that talking about, I have one phone that only works for incoming calls, and like I may mention before, knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that's like a tech issue that I have of talking about that with a telephone. I'm like, well, what are you gonna do with the phone? I'm like, you can't connect it to it's a separate line, so what would you do with a phone that only works for incoming calls? And knowing that I'm like, yeah, that you mean that you can't make no emergency calls with it? You can't connect it to no fax line, no chat line or anything like that? And then on the other hand, and knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that whoever that more likely that has the number, that more likely they'll be able to reach it by as well. But the way I think about it, though, that I'm like, yeah, for whenever people that more likely that may get a phone one of these days, if they spend for like a down payment, it goes by the story by saying is for the smart button Discover. The reason to why maybe somebody gets a phone, a home phone, is more likely to know is that if anything, that here is the number to be able to call before all this other stuff comes around, such as what you calls like the Apple Mac app or something like that, or if it's the speakerphone, or if it's HDTV option settings or anything like that. And for the most part, that you say that a telephone number is the first thing that more likely is given other than the account number. And just knowing about if it's really which cause like that technical issue. For that tech issue, to knowing about that, yeah, that the phone that don't work, a phone that don't work, for any, if you're trying to call out, and then the next thing you know, it's like you don't hear, like, you don't even have, hear that the phone ringing, and then all of a sudden it's like, you hear that the dial tone, but I'm like, yeah, knowing about that. Like with me though, that I have a number of phones around the house, and thinking about, I'm like, yeah, whichever one that rings, and the one in the bedroom is going to ring, etc., etc. But just knowing about the smart button discover is basically talking about is like to discover ways of knowing about. I'm like, yeah, a new way of how to say for technology is knowing about that. Back those couple years ago, I started out with no phones. Use and knowing about you had to walk a certain distance just to make a call and buy a phone card if you want to call out of the area, etc., etc. But whenever I was young, that want to have my, I used to always think that I'm like, yeah, that you want to have, I want to have my own home phone, my own phone number. I'm like, yeah. A lot of people up there at the school, of course, they had their own phones, and they say quite a few of them who were at least around the age of 18 would have a phone, and I'm like, yeah, I guess you could say I kind of got the idea by a calculator. I'm like, yeah, it would be nice. You see people using the calculators and knowing about it. It'd be nice if they had a phone like that, but kept thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, don't mention it. Knowing about, yeah, pay phones, between pay phones and pagers, and knowing about that, if I can remember right, that, yep, it had gotten a pager, but it's only been used maybe a couple of times. People page you, you'll call the number just to page you by, and if I was at school or something like that. But knowing about the ad that I see for the telephone was like this right here, and if I can remember right, either if it was an Apple or Verizon or some company like that, AT&T, but I'm not sure. But for the most part, it was a phone kind of like this right here. And it said on there that it told the details about it, but on your hand, it knowing about that with the telephone, it said on there that the cost was free. It said the cost was free. The cost, the price, it said it was free, and at the time, I'm like wondering, well, a lot of times, what do they usually mean by that? Knowing about, I'm like, really, that. At the time, like wondering that there ain't nothing free, especially if it's going to be online or through the catalog or something like that. But I kept thinking about that maybe that if it required a deposit, maybe if it was a certain kind of credit or deposit, to where that more likely that I'm thinking of that maybe what it is that for apply for good credit, and on your hand too, if you open up an account maybe through Amazon or something like that, at the time, or it could have been something related to it. If it's your first phone, and then you get the free phone. Your first phone, you get the free phone, etc., etc. But I can remember it said, for free. The cost of it was free. It was brand new. And I can remember that. I used to think, though, that, for the price and maybe what we expect to pay for most of our phone designs. And for the most part, that there may be some that may say that they may expect to pay maybe at least $100. And I remember back then, I think it was back in '99, and back in 1999, that I'm sure that most phone users, that they say if they were to have, like, go buy, maybe if it's Singular or T-Mobile or some company like that, if it's or Skype or something like that, knowing about that how much money that they maybe would be willing to pay for a phone, that you don't really want to get one of those cheap ones, that you want to get one that they say that, well, depend on what phone you want. Do you want one that waterproof? You want the silk or something like that, one with the face cover or something like that. And I can remember going over to places like other retail stores, and they would talk about the phones, and then I'm like, yeah, they had the speakerphone, like, and who would you like to call today, or something like that. But I remember that they said that, yep, you had to be 18 or older in order to be able to, say with the contracts, and usually they say that, for most contracts, what do they usually mean? It usually means is by that by the time it's like an agreement, it's like a promising agreement between there that usually lasts between 6 months to a year, to aware that if you sign up for it, and then you gotta keep up, say, the payments and knowing about you for whatever the agreement says. But on the other hand, and knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that with, say, if it's contracts or anything like that, any late fees or anything like that. But let's just say that anybody who's going to be a telephone user is know if you're going to be downloading any amps or anything like that, maybe from the wireless, broadband service or anything like that. Knowing about with most telephones that for over the years, it's like talking about, is just knowing about that, yeah, that for most of the time with most telephones is like, yeah, that that you really more likely you really love them whenever they work, huh? I'm like, yeah, that whenever you dial a number and then it starts ringing or something like that, and talking about, I'm like, yeah, and then voice messaging, etc., that's all included. And knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that making a phone call has never really been easier, especially knowing about that if you're going to absolutely love it. But on the other hand, too, that knowing about, I'm like, yeah, by the time you get the bill, too, I'm like, that knowing about between what you love and what you hate. But but other than that, like talking about, it's like, let's say for most of our experience with phones, though, that knowing about that, from this phone right here will be a kind of example right here of a phone that I wanted to buy those a couple years ago, and I can remember that whenever I bought that the phone, though, that I can remember that the one thing that I expected that to want with the phone is like what you call like the smart button discover of talking about not really talking about a belly button, but the type of a button to push, knowing about to make calls and stuff like that. And it's just knowing about that, yeah, that I wanted a cell phone to where I can make calls with, and then for whoever I want to talk to, especially if it was going to be a parents or a family or friend member or something like that. And a lot of times that knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that that having to share a phone with maybe a few other people, maybe at the office or maybe at home or something like that, was pretty hard too. But it's like that, yeah, that I can remember whenever I can tell anybody that that whenever I was the age of 17, that I this was one thing other than before that maybe the iPod, iPad Nanos or iPods were even now were discovered, knowing about from whenever they were talking about them, but usually a lot of times it was the phones, though. It was the cell phone. And with most of the time with the cell phone, that I can remember that some people even told me that like yeah, that they only have a cell phone really, that maybe for business reasons, or if it's like if you think that that if you're going to be talking on the phone very much, it's like I think maybe it will be a waste of money if you don't talk very much to other people. But I don't know, I'm like talking about maybe kids kids younger the age of 10 years old, and I don't know, I'm like anybody probably say about usually that are you gonna maybe stop the kid from wanting to get their own phone, if it's smartwatches or anything like that, knowing about that really you be good and you make good grades and save up your money, more likely you'll see what you get. But on your hand, and knowing about you have right here is with the this phone right here. There's an example right here of this phone, and for the most part that you have right here is like the call, the number, and then right here will be, say, is a screen right here, and what I can go ahead and do right here is using right here is a 4B pencil. But with the screen, maybe kind of like on Skype though. But let's just say if I was talking to, I'll go ahead and other than the guy, I'll go ahead and draw right here as like this was a. This was a person right here talking, in the screen. Go ahead and draw, say, a little bit, the eyes right here. Let's say with the nose, and then the mouth. But you have right here, if I would be connected with somebody, and most of the time that they would probably say, well, if it was, talking to them, if it was from, places like maybe Israel, or if it was, Africa or somewhere like that, some continent like that. I know about. I'm like, yeah, we need a phone, some type, if it's a trace phone or anything like that. We need a type of phone that would get really great clear reception. If it's if you're like what you call in the middle of the Pacific or Indian Ocean, or you're somewhere out up north or south, parts of Canada or somewhere like that, need a phone that's going to maybe work by satellite, something like that. But just knowing about that, the tops of, for what we see, it's like knowing about, if we're getting our money's worth out of what we can do with these type of devices, though. And really, though, that for the whole purpose about buying a cell phone, that not only that maybe that you get your own private line and that maybe your own private number, but on your hand too, that knowing about if it's really about that the package, the package that you get, that a lot of things that more likely that are included with the package. And I even know that, like, say, I even heard it that like Microsoft Office, that like Office Edition, that they even offer Skype minutes as well. Like, I guess you say if it's Skype minutes or any type of connection kind of, if I can remember right, it is Skype minutes, because I checked it out that usually that they have it to where that they offer, like, which says for like the type of Skype credits, but Skype minutes. But anyway, but basically that what exactly are you paying for whenever you go out and it's like buy it's like even if it's a card, I'm like, even if it's a card with minutes, it's like that if you don't, that the type of phone that you have, if you have access to like other features, such as the browser. I'm like, the phone I had, I'm like, I still have it, but then it don't work anymore. I put it on a charger, it don't work anymore. But it has the web browser. And whenever the phones came out, I'm trying to remember the kind of phone I had, not by the provider, but but the type of phone. I think that there's different type of phone models, such as if it's I don't know if there's if there's a phone call, I think there's one called Galaxy the Galaxy G G5 1112, G5 112 or something like that, the Galaxy. Or if it's another phone model, could be it's like that Smile Mac or something like that. That it's like something like the Smiley Mac or something like that. Smiley Mac Z15, something like that. You say for Z15, something like that. I'm like, you have these different phone models, and think about one particular one that maybe I'm familiar with, huh? But you have maybe a few list of different phone models, and for the most part, is knowing about what the type of phone models that more likely to get is that that you get one, and then knowing about for all what it can do. If you can make an international calling, etc., etc., and then you have all these other features like Facebook, etc., etc. But Facebook, and then if you want to go ahead and get connected to say the live live chat, etc., etc. But on the other hand, and knowing about, I'm like, yeah, we may think of like if we get our money's worth out of something, such as like what you call like our phone right here. And back in early '99, I used to think that I seen people have them, but then I kept thinking about that they seemed really expensive back then. I'm like, you're talking about more than just a couple bucks, just to get them. It was about between $130 to maybe $200, for one of those things. But like talking about, that like the iPhone 5s, devices like that more likely they're going to add up in big price too. You're talking about between maybe $900 to $1,000 for one of those, like the iPhone, if it's the iPhone 6 or something like that, for those touchscreen kinds. But there you have it. I'm like, I guess it's not really a clear picture drawing right here, but it's like drawing here. If this was like a person right here, I'm like, yeah, like say kind of like maybe like a little example of a lady. I'm like, but of a lady, like say with the green shirt, but green shirt. I like if she had makeup on or something like that. But anyway, but you have right here of talking about is like for the most part with connections though, is knowing about, you know, for that with technology though, that you know, we more likely may know that technology may at times, you know, they say that, you know, if you really you spent a lot of time trying to get something to work, and then it's like, you know, smart button discover, you know, on top of the, like I may say that, like, you know, use my imagination every day, and just thinking about that, you know, just your imagination, well, you know, almost anything that more likely that you think that could be coming you to the futures list. I'm like, it's probably already around, like, you know, Bluetooth, whichever it is. But the way I think about though is that, you know, if I can maybe draw an example right here of like talking about if there's a device what you call is like called the Tino Shadow. You know, Tino Shadow? The Tino Shadow right here that basically says like, you know, talking about that, you know, the Tino Shadow. The Tino Shadow that could more likely be accessed from the, you know, the menu options on an actual phone, you know, such as like a smartphone, to where they say that it basically that to where with the Tino Shadow, the Tino Shadow is only accessed, you know, for whoever that that uses the phone. And like if this is you know, our own personal phone, it's a shadow to where that only maybe, you know, we can see, we only have to say the access capability, and then that knowing with the Tino Shadow is that, you know, if it's you know, if you want to kind of keep anything, you know, personally, any type of what you call those tricky, you know, anything that more likely is like, you know, a type of trick that more likely that maybe we want to discover too is like, you know, how to find out. I'm like, yeah, that there's a number that we don't recognize on our phones, and there's a way that we can actually connect to like what you call is like the web browser, you know, look up what the number was. But there was those devices I remember seeing in the store to where that you would have it to where that you would be able to look up addresses and numbers to people, and actually it would actually show you about if there was something like you know, the Tino Shadow, to where, you know, if you want to look up a person's name and then maybe their number, you know, etc., and just know if there's something like, you know, the Tino Shadow, that you know, you can actually use that to where that, you know, to be able to recognize the phone that you're using, and knowing about, you know, you'd like to look somebody up, and just know about anything else that's kept confidential. And it's like, you know, yeah, that I like to look up this person's name. I'm like, and then any information that more likely that's available, that more likely that could be, you know, that could be available, say on a device, and knowing about, like, yeah, that you know, ways of how to keep in touch with other people, and just knowing about with technology though, that with technology that technology more likely moves forward almost, you know, each and every day, like, you know, of the year, for new stuff that comes around. But what about the 911, you know, for the emergency service, 911 emergency service, you know, how far has that moved along from over the years? It's like, you know, do we, you know, at the time, you know, we wonder though that for the most part with services, you know, any other type of service lines, if there's like what calls like, you know, the Tino Shadow, I can go ahead and write right here for like say Tino Shadow, for the Tino Shadow. If there's anything like that, to where that, you know, for like emergency services, that, you know, lines or anything like that, and knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that that you know, ways for how technology can actually you know, check and know about, like, you know, besides, you know, the number to where they, you know, call for in case of emergency, and knowing about if there's like what you call, I know that they may have, you know, maybe GPS accessible or something like that, maybe something that works by just of a touch of a button. Knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that that they probably say that, yeah, that you know, with most phones, it's like yeah. With the 911 emergency service line, that they may say that, you know, they even arrange it to where that they actually can take a control over, you know, Oh, it's like the phone sends out a message saying about what's actually going on during the situation. If it was anything that was related to an automobile accident or anything like that, that more likely that they would be able to send help and then be able to retrieve any information directly, say from the phone or from the connection. And they usually say though that with most of the part with most connections though that. Usually that with the connections that like, well, usually whenever phones is like in service, so it's like with the connection's very clear, knowing about it's like really good services. And for the most part that if we're going to be using any type of phones though, is like, yeah, if you're going to be in a place, like if it's going to be a medical building, a hospital, clinic, or anything like that, knowing about the phone that don't ring and don't get no service within the building though. But on the hand, if it's between television sets and talking about telephones though, and then you have right here is like the talk, and then it's like the end, like for hang up, the hang up button right here, and it's like the talk button, and basically talk about what does it usually mean whenever you hear deep 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 deep. But on your hand, and knowing about, I'm like, yeah, we may wonder though that I'm like, if the phones were to have any type of musical tune, like whenever we dial a 1 or a 2 or a 3, a lot of times that we usually hear, such as boop beep boop boop beep boop, or like boop beep boop 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 boop. But other than that, like talking about, really, can people tell by what number that maybe you're dialing just by hearing the sounds of the tunes? And the way I think about it, I'm like, yeah, that usually that I'm like, yeah, well, are you calling that person? Like, well, how did you know? Well, I can tell just by the touch and dial. I know it goes by saying it's like talking about is like if we were to dial the number as like so far as 888 or something like that, or 000, anything like that, like talking about, like it goes by saying like go by the dial tone, such as ding 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 ding. But other than that, like talking about like for how you dial the numbers, huh? But on the hand, and knowing about if we would actually do the math, and then so I say for the smart button discover, I know a type of button the more likely discovering new ways, of course, of for types of causing for communication, and knowing about for any text issues that we may come around, just like with me though, having a number of phones, and I bought a number of them to where I have one phone other than like which caused like besides the Tino Shadow of that you had maybe some tech issues of with one phone that only works for incoming calls, and one phone that works for both long distance incoming calls, etc., etc. But you may have one phone that more likely that only keeps track of the numbers that were already called, etc., etc., yada yada yada, that type of stuff. But on your hand, the way I would think about though, with the smart button discover is basically talking about is that with which we call maybe free stuff, like with free phone, knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that do usually people buy phones to allow them to where that they can go ahead and call globally. I'm like, yeah, that a phone to where that you can reach anybody all around the planet. They say like international calling. But the way I think about it, I'm like, yeah, that do we have that time? Do we have that to where any type of phone that are fireproof or waterproof? Knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that as somebody who were to be going scuba diving, I'm like, if anybody who were to be going scuba diving, do they think that they need some type of a phone to use in case if they maybe spot a giant jellyfish, or maybe if it's a shark or anything like that, that they can go in and call wildlife control or something like that. I'm like, yeah, like yeah, you want to know where I'm calling you from? Like, what do you call me? I'm calling you from Mount Everest. I'm on top of Mount Everest, and I'm just calling like I can't guarantee that there ain't no service up there and towards Mount Everest. But on the other hand, I know I'm like, yeah, you know, if you're hiking on the mountains, etc., in the woods, I'm like, yeah, but you know, for no matter where you go, like talking about, you know, you're guaranteed your phone's gonna continue to work. But on the hand, knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that what do you call? I talk about between what you call between the dumb device compared to the smart button discover, and knowing about, you know, for ways of if we ever do our study and understand about knowing about how something works, is knowing about between messing with a few buttons and switches and maybe a few plugs, whichever it is. Of talking about is like doing the math right, and is knowing about working with like what you call like for the Tino Shadow is that knowing about with these phones here is that knowing about getting our money's worth out of them, but just knowing and understanding about if we're going to have you say multiple amount of TVs, though, that we may think that whenever we get a phone and then maybe after a year, then you get another phone and then that other phone that does such and such, but really, what are you going to do about whenever you come up to the point to where that you have 3 phones, but then one of them that you can't, you know, call out, you know, like, you know, one of them that, you know, that don't even work on the minute plan, and, you know, the other one that has a bad reception, you know, what if one of them gets lost or stolen, damaged, whatever, and then just thinking about, I'm like, yeah, that, with Smart Button Discover, talking about, I'm like, yeah, then we got plenty of ways to keep ourselves busy, knowing about, I'm like, yeah, ways for contact, but, the way I would think about, though, is that, really, about, you know, for maybe the married couples, you know, for married people who are getting married and knowing about, like, you have a smart button discover, you know, it's like for the phone, and knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that there's a type of a phone to where that more likely that you probably think about, like, yeah, that there's a not really a phone that can walk and talk yet, but let's just say a phone that more likely that you know, a phone you know, that more likely, you know, like waterproof. I'm like say water, you know, and then a type of a phone that, you know, that can take the type of a damage effect, such as, you know, heat resistant if it's out in the sun for a very long time. Knowing about, I'm like, if it's out in the sun for a very long time, knowing about type of phone like that. But on the hand, the way I would think about that, we would probably say about, you know, for the most part, that, you know, if our phones only designed to make phone calls, and usually they say that well, whenever they were first around before analog, that knowing about, you know, that's usually what they were made for. You know, if you had the number to them and on your hand, and knowing about that yeah, that if you had the chip or memory card with it, whichever it is, but you know, I don't know, you know, we well, I don't think that we really need a phone. I'm like, yeah, you take it almost everywhere with you. Like, you know, to the park, you to the museum, whichever. But a lot of ways, like warning, though, that I'm like, that yeah, that you know, do we, you know, if we more likely, you know, anything that we may think about, that you know, the phone can more likely can do, but then there may be some things that maybe a phone cannot do either. I'm like, you know, such as what you call, you know, that well, you know, the phone, yeah, the phone, it's like it's kind of hard to think of something that more likely a phone cannot do. But on your hand too, does the phone cook you meals? You know, does the phone, can the phone take the trash out for you? Does the phone clean the windows? But on your hand, and knowing about is like the different things for what a phone can or cannot do. And just knowing about, I'm like, yeah, just knowing about, you know, reason for basics I'm talking about, it's like for the Smart Button Discover. And a type of button to where if like go by, say, for beep, 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 or something like that for, say, for the local, like a, you know, who would you like to call today? Yeah, this is, you say, the local operator. This is what you call is like the local operator. Like, this is what you call is like for the local operator. But other than that, like talking about here is like for the smartphone, like for the Smart Button Discover. I talk about, let's say, something that we could discover. And a lot of times I think about, that you talk about is like, you know, for a Smart Button Discover, say, color activity. Basically talking about is like, you know, for Smart Button Discover is basically talking about right here. I talk, say, with phones. So you have right here is like, say, the headset, and you know, I'll say with the microphone, and I'll say the, you know, the audio it is, and basically that I talk about, I'm like, yeah, that when around the time that whenever I bought one of these, it was just like, yeah, that talk about it would be kind of cool to connect to a cell phone and be able to chit-chat with it. It's like, say, for hands-free. But then knowing about, is like, what do you call it? Knowing about, you know, what do you think about? It's like talk about, you know, it's unplugged. Oh, I talk about, well, you know, you listen to, it's like what you call, it's like the phone conversation. It's like the phone conversation. It's like in your imagination or something like that. But the way I think about, though, is like tough safe between old technology and maybe the new technology, though. It's like, yeah, right here's the headset, and if we were talking about, you know, something that was related to the smart button discover, I like to tap a button to where they discover new things. And one of those new things that more likely could be, if it's what you call, maybe for low you know, phone minute rates or anything like that on most, you know, telephone plans, as I talk about, say, for money's worth something that you purchase, you know, etc., etc. But well, if we come to that situation to where if we have a phone that more likely that only works for incoming calls, one of them that only keeps track of call history, etc., etc. You know, what phone that more likely that proves that you did your home, you know, that you turned in, you know, your homework, you paid the bill. I'm like, well, what phone that more likely that keeps track of that? But the way I think about, though, I say that, yeah, well, the telephone. The telephone would have been in it more likely back about, you know, it's like, you know, about if it was early in 1941 and on about, I'm like, yeah, that, you know, talk about these headsets. And I talk about they have is they had these, you know, these cups and stuff that you hold up to your ear, you know, etc., etc. But the way I want to think about, though, that with most of the time with most technology is that you say that, you know, from wherever we are, that knowing about for how we get connected, and we may think, though, that from how clear it comes in, and then from how it's, you know, trending, they know about if we can actually see the person and talk to them at the same time. In a lot of ways, so that so far as I guess our minds are always open for the next source of technology, and just knowing about if it's like what say is like with the headset, or if it's anything to do with like what it calls like that, yeah, that you have right here is like a phone, and I could, you know, I don't know about, you know, a few other people that they may say that whenever they get a cell phone, a lot of times that they want to have their own private number, and for the most part, that you usually get that whenever you get a cell phone, and usually that, you know, they are expensive, and for the most part that I'm like, it's not really about the fact about, you know, you just want to put it in your pocket, you know, you want something to take with you to the store, etc., etc. But there may be other people that may have their own, you know, answers for the reasons to why they bought their own phones, their cell phones, is knowing about other than you can take it with you, that you have your own private, you know, line, your own private number. But in a lot of ways, though, that at the time, you know, really, do people buy them just because, you know, for other reasons too? Like, you know, if it's related to a vacation schedule, you know, vacation schedule. I'll go ahead and buy a smartphone for vacation schedule. You know, I'll go ahead and buy a smartphone, you know, just because that you know, it was advertised in the catalogs as, you know, 50% off, you know, something like that. But the way I would think about it, though, that with most of the time with most smart button discover, knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that you know, for like what you call us, you know, for paying our dues. I know about if we can maybe pick one thing on a top, and all of us, you know, for the smart button, and knowing about like the type of button, you know, you better think, I'm like, yeah, the type of button is like, and not really what you call is knowing it's like with the, you know, the belly button, but you know, the type of button that more likely that we probably call is like, say, the push of a button. Say with the push of a button. That's like talking about, it's like they say with the push of a button right here. You have right here, if I were to push, it's like here for 5555, like for 5555. I talk about, you know, for the push of a button, and do the math right, and it's like, you know, for 5 times 5, knowing about, like, yeah, if it's like what you call, you know, 5 cents a minute, something like that, you know, say it's fine, you know, for local service tower, etc., etc. But just knowing about, like, yeah, that for the things that more likely that we can learn first, like maybe say by the touch of a button, and like talking about, like, yeah, something that you may find something that may interest you knowing about. after you buy it, and then you may spend so much time with it, just knowing about how does this work and how does that work. But if I would probably think about the best ways of knowing about, for how something works, is knowing about, I'm like, that if you're able to take it home with you, and you may have a lot more time at home to just kind of spend time with, trying to discover, what it does, etc., and know about, for maybe with the purpose to why you bought it for. And I get anybody that may say about, if we were to collect $10 or maybe $5 or maybe $25 or $30, and we may think about that, we got the power, and knowing about, we don't want to go out and buy something new, we want to go out and spend some money, especially on paydays, and if it's going to be a headset or anything like that, iPhone 5 accessories, etc., and just knowing about, like, we take it home with us, take it somewhere, and we say something to check out. But other than that, like talking about, say, something we can discover. And on the other hand, too, that way I would think about, though, from over the years, one thing that more likely we did discover is knowing about, like, it gives you the opportunity to where you can, you can use your own, say, minutes on air, and then on the other hand, too, call numbers, especially if they're going to be a long distance. And seems to always be that, it's like the type of question to discover, knowing about, I'm like, really, is it going to work? When you say under the sea, is it going to work? It's like talk about, say, if you go up into space or anything like that. But the way I would think about it, though, that say it's like the smart button discover. I say if we would actually do, our homework, knowing about it's like that study about what the phone does. Is like, say, with technology, if it's basically talk about the television set that gives us a certain amount of channels, etc. Either way, it's like for don't worry, like talk about, like, it's like knowing about, it's like, are you happy for what you got? But other than that, like I say, so for surprise, it's like, happy birthday, or it's like happy anniversary, etc. But on the other hand, too, so if I say, knowing is like, that perfect gift, it's like to celebrate that certain someone. But other than that, I say for the smart button is like, for discover, I say connectivity. It's like the pick, it's like maybe one of your favorites, and knowing about, it's like between for what we absolutely love and what we don't like at all, what we hate, knowing about, I'm like, it's like with the phone. The telephone, whenever it breaks at the wrong time, that's whenever I'm like, But on the other hand, whenever it works, whenever I need it to, I'm like, so exciting. But other than that, I'm talking about right here, so I say the smartphone discover, it's like, say, color activity.